we're putting the Hori Split Pad Pro head to head with the Mobapad. So the official Joy-Cons for the Switch, well, they're fine, but they're pretty small, pretty crampy, and well, you know, maybe you want a full-size joystick instead of those tiny little ones that are found on the Joy-Cons. And if so, you may have seen the Hori Split Pad Pro and the Mobapad M6 Gemini. So we're gonna be putting them head to head here today to see which one is better. Bear in mind though, that the Hori Split Pad Pro is actually officially licensed, whereas the Mobapad is not. So let's dive straight into things and check out the features of the Mobapad and the Hori Split Pad Pro. So the Hori here, we'll start with these because, well, there's not really any features at all. They basically have no rumble, there's no gyro, there's no NFC support, there's no wireless support either, there's no internal battery, so they must be used on the Nintendo Switch. Now these have been around for a little while now and they're still great. We've actually got a dedicated review video of these if you want to see more detail there. But yeah, there's not really many features on these because they are lacking a lot. But what they do have is full-size joysticks, which is really nice. They have turbo buttons on both sides, so you can assign turbo to any button, which is really, really cool. And they have back paddles. So there are actual back paddles here. So you can use the back paddles to assign any button of its own controller side to it. So you can only put the left sort of buttons on that left paddle there. And you can assign turbo to that paddle as well, which is really nice. Now let's move over to the Mobapad M6 Gemini. So the Mobapad M6 Gemini are here. They have a lot more features and dare I say it, they look a lot nicer as well. So the features here, well, they've got full-size Alps professional esports joysticks, but we'll get more into that a bit later. They've got a D-pad just like the Hori do. These actually do have rumble. So there's various rumble settings indicated by these sort of little buttons at the bottom here. You can assign different rumble settings depending on like each side. So you can have this one really strong, this one low, or you can have them the same or whatever you want, which is really cool. They have gyro as well. So you can actually use these controllers with gyro, which is very, very nice. They also have back paddles, but they are assigned to like macro presses instead of just an assignable button. Now there is a way of getting these to be used apparently with just one button. However, I've not figured that out yet. So for me, meh, like they're all right. But yeah, maybe they'll do updated ones where that's a bit easier to use because these are from China and there's no English instruction manual. So I've just had to like use these as much as I can to get what I can out of them. But on top of this, what these have is mechanical switches like a mouse. So again, we've actually done a dedicated full-blown in-depth review of these. So if you want to see more detail about these, definitely go and check that video out. But yeah, these have mechanical switches as you can probably hear now already. So instead of that kind of like mushiness that you get from membrane switches like the Hori Split Pads have, these are much clickier, and that's the same with the sort of top buttons as well. Now on top of that, these also have turbo as well, which I forgot to mention. So these are way more feature packed, but they are still lacking the wireless feature. There's no battery inside these. So, you know, it will drain the Switch a little bit by using these or the Hori Split Pad Pros because there's no internal batteries and you're forced to using these handheld only. Oh, and lastly, before I forget, these also have changeable faceplates. So you can actually change these out. It comes with black ones if you buy the white versions, or if you buy the black versions, you get black ones, and you can just take them off and replace them or customize these, which is a pretty cool added feature. So both of these are a larger design. They are way more comfortable than the standard Joy-Cons there. If we look at the sort of size difference, look at the size difference there. Like you can see sort of just how much bigger and more ergonomic these are compared to the actual Joy-Cons, and the same could be said with the Hori. So you can see just how much bigger they are and like how much more sort of ergonomics there are there. However, when we compare the Hori and the Mobapad, I actually prefer the Mobapad because the Mobapad has better ergonomics. Like if you see there, you can see how much bigger the Mobapad is. There's much more grip there and it sits in your hand way nicer. Like the Mobapad is just like big and chunky and you've got this really big grip just here. Whereas the Hori kind of, it's got grip and it's more ergonomic than the sort of standard Joy-Cons, but there's not as much grip as the Mobapad. And the Mobapad as well on here, if you can see, there is actually like loads of texture there. There is very, very slight texture on the Hori, but not as much as that Mobapad just there. So in terms of like comfort and design, well, they're both way better than the Joy-Cons, but for me, the point goes to the Mobapad. So both of them do have turbo, and yeah, I kind of mentioned that earlier, but you can use the turbo with any buttons. On the Mobapad, you've got 3 little like bullets just there to assign turbo, whereas on the Hori, you've got literally a turbo button. And now turbo, basically you can assign a button so that when you press and hold it, it will spam that button so many times, or you can assign it so that you press it once and it will repeat that, or you press it again and then it like cancels it out. Now the back buttons here, I do find the Hori easier to use because there's no macro on these. It's literally just straight up, you just assign that to whatever button you want and then you press it as many times as you want, or you can assign turbo to it. It's really, really easy to use. Whereas the Mobapad, well, that kind of acts as a macro button. And yeah, you can apparently change that back button to be just used with one thing, because currently it's a macro. So when you press it, it will like repeat multiple actions, and I don't really like that. Apparently you can change that. Again, I don't know how to do it because I've got like Chinese manual and it doesn't say in there. There are different versions of the Mobapad, so I've got a feeling it might be a different version compared to the M6 that I've got here. So for me, the back pedal win goes to the Hori. Now, one thing I really love about the Mobapad is that rumble. It's not HD rumble like the Joy-Cons, it's like just basic rumble, but I do really like the fact that it's got rumble, and it's got like 4 different settings of rumble that you can cycle through as well. And I love the fact that there's gyro as well. The gyro, it works for me absolutely fine. I've not had a problem with that. Like playing Pokemon Legends Arceus, like using the controllers for gyro, it really, really worked well. So I'm glad that that's got that. It doesn't have NFC either like the Hori, but it's nice to see rumble and gyro, which the Hori just don't have. All right, so the D-pads and the joysticks, let's talk about them next. Well, the D-pads, meh, they're all right. I actually prefer the Mobapad D-pad. It feels a bit freer, like it's a bit nicer to roll your thumb around, whereas the Hori is a bit stiffer. But to be fair, they're both fine on both of these. They're not amazing, they're not the best I've ever used, but they're both acceptable D-pads, I would say that. But the sticks are where this differs a lot. So you've got Alps eSports sticks on the Mobapad, and you've just got whatever the heck they're using on these Hori ones. But I will say that the Mobapad, they do have a dead zone. So there is a bit of a dead zone there where you basically move the stick a little bit and nothing happens. You have to kind of move it a bit more for it to actually engage. Whereas the Hori are way more accurate. There's no dead zone whatsoever on the Hori. And again, these are officially licensed where these are not. So it could just be like a build quality thing. But to be fair, meh, the Hori definitely sort of win that point for the thumbsticks. But it is nice to have thumbsticks on both of them, and to be perfectly honest, I use the Mobapads more than the Horis anyway, and that's because for someone like playing more casually, you won't notice that dead zone at all, unless I've just told you and now you'll be like, oh okay, yeah, maybe there is a bit of a dead zone. But if you're somebody that's affected by dead zone like anyway, and that's a conscious thought of I'm not buying it if it's got dead zone, then don't buy the Mobapads. Definitely get the Hori, because if you fancy yourself as a bit of an esports player or competitive player, well then the Hori are for you. Okay, so buttons and triggers. Well, there's some big changes here compared to the Hori and the Mobapad just here. The Hori, the buttons are really mushy membrane buttons. There's quite a lot of travel. It's like, I don't know, it just feels a bit rattly, and it's the same with all of the buttons. They're fine, they're absolutely okay, but the buttons are nothing special. Whereas on the Mobapad, it's actually got mechanical switches, and they're way more like accurate. They kind of return to their starting position much faster. Essentially what a mechanical switch is a mouse switch. So as you get in a left or right click on a mouse is what this has in every button. So not the little buttons, those are just kind of like normal, but in all of the face buttons and the shoulder buttons, they're all mechanical switches. The only downside here is there is an audible click, so you can hear that kind of click. Whereas if I get the Hori, you can hear that kind of like rattliness. I much prefer the Mobapad. I massively love those mechanical switches, but it's preference at the end of the day. You know, like what I might like, you might not like. So if you prefer membrane switches, well then the Hori is going to be great for you. Personally, I really like the Mobapad switches. They just feel better. You know they've actuated and they return really quickly. I just really like it. Okay, so what's better, Andy? Like, what do you think, Andy? Which one do you prefer out of the Mobapad or the Hori? Well, personally, I prefer the Mobapads. I just do. And that's because I prefer the extra grip support there. I love the mechanical buttons and switches that they've used. I just really like the whole thing with the rumble and the gyro. They're more of a complete package. The biggest letdown is the fact that there's dead zone on those joysticks. But if you don't mind a bit of dead zone and you're more casual, like more of a casual player, then these are a much more rounded controller. I just prefer them in almost every way. The only letdown is those joysticks. Whereas the Hori, well, they're so basic, there's no extra features, there's not as much grip there, and the only thing going for them really is the fact that you've got no dead zone whatsoever, so the sticks are super accurate, and the fact that they are officially licensed. So you know when you buy a pair of these, you're going to get the same quality each and every time. If I bought 10 of these, of the Hori, they're probably all going to be exactly the same quality. Whereas if I bought 10 of the Mobapad, well then they're probably going to differ because they're not officially licensed and they're just shipped from China. I don't know what the quality control is there. I may have been lucky, right? So I may have been lucky and these are absolutely perfect. From what I've seen, everyone else seems to have no problems with these other than the fact that there's a little bit of dead zone. And price-wise, well, they're roughly in the same kind of ballpark. The Mobapad you can get for around 30 to 35 pounds, whereas the Hori are between 30 and 50 pounds, depending on the edition that you get, because I've got the boring ones that came out originally like 3 years ago, but you can get really cool designs on the Horis now. I'm kind of jealous. But yeah, the price is roughly in the same bracket. Again, you just have to take in mind that the Hori are officially licensed and the Mobapad are not, and the Mobapads you have to import from China. So there's a chance you could buy it and they'll never turn up or they get lost in the post or whatever, whereas the Hori, you can pretty much just buy them off Amazon and they'll be with you next day. So what do you think? What do you prefer? Do you like the look of the Mobapads or the Hori better? I'd love to hear everything you would like to say about it in the comments, and I reply to everything as much as I can at least. But anyway, if you want to see more in-depth detailed videos about these individual reviews, well then click here, because there's going to be one video just here for the Mobapad and one video just here for the Hori, and they are independent reviews where I go into much more detail, like far more detail about each individual one. So if you're preferring one or the other, go and watch their videos just here and subscribe as well before you do anything else.